It's time!
Get up, let me begin. This is CWSN. You ain't heard about us yet, well you better know now, because it's the place that it all goes down on.
What's going on, ladies and gents? This is the crew back with another edition of Strikes and Submissions. My co-host Michael Daly. How you doing, my guy?
Dorian, another week, another W. Great to be on with you. Got a lot to talk about, whether it's upcoming, forthcoming, or we're going in the past. Not too far past, but in the past nonetheless. A lot to talk about.
For sure, guys. And make sure you guys subscribe to us here on the YouTube channel. We're almost at 1,000. Let's get to 1,000 before the end of the week. I think we can do it. Make sure you guys subscribe. Also, Instagram and Twitter. Follow TWSN and download the mobile app so you can catch all our articles and things like that. You can follow me right here. Mike will have his hand in the description. And let's jump right into it now. First and foremost, we do have some unfortunate news in the boxing world. Errol Spence, in his pre-fight evaluation, found out he had a torn retina in his eye, not going to be able to fight Manny Pacquiao. But Michael Daly is here to tell you who is stepping in as a replacement for him, because I can't pronounce this man's name and I don't want to butcher it. So take us away, Mike.
Well, thank you so much, Dorian. That man is Yordenis Ugas. Dorian, you know what? When I saw the news that Errol Spence Jr. pulled out of the fight, my heart dropped, because month after month, boxing has been devastated by fights that have gone to the wayside. They were created or almost signed, sealed, and delivered until they weren't. And this was a fight that I think so many people were looking forward to, because let's be honest, fans didn't get the Tyson Fury-Anthony Joshua fight that everyone wanted. And even the Deontay Wilder fight against Tyson Fury, the trilogy, that didn't happen this summer. This was the one fight that mainstream fans, I guess you could say, would have tuned in to watch. Because Manny Pacquiao, although he's 42 years of age, he's still a global figure.
He's still Manny Pacquiao. Exactly.
He's still Manny Pacquiao, still has a massive audience, whether it's in the Philippines, the U.S., wherever. He's still a massive guy. And Errol Spence Jr., you can make an argument, he's the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. If he's not the best, he's either 2 or 3. It's just a big blow for this fight to not happen. With that being said, though, Yordenis Ugas is not a bad substitute. He's not. A lot of people don't know who he is, and that's okay. I understand that boxing, it still hasn't reached the mainstream audience that it once had back in the 80s and 90s. And back then, a lot of mainstream fans would know the 6th-ranked welterweight in the world, like a Yordenis Ugas, who was also a world champion. This time, though, in 2021, that's not the case. I will say this, though. Manny Pacquiao is in for a tough night at the office. This is not going to be an easy test whatsoever. I think the one difference, though, Dorian, is that Pacquiao is not going up against someone who is as such a destroyer as Errol Spence. I would say Ugas is far more measured, and he fights to many more decisions than I would say Errol Spence does.
Power Spence has.
Yeah, Spence, he just has that overhand right that just zaps you. And there's a reason why Spence has 21 KOs on his record, and Ugas only has 12. And it's no knock on Ugas. He just fights differently. Ugas fought a very close fight against Abel Ramos on September 6th of last year. I think this is going to be another very close fight, especially with the fact that Pacquiao is coming off of a 2+ year layoff, and Ugas is fighting almost a year to the day since his last time in the ring. And Ugas, this will be his first time fighting in front of fans in almost 2 years. So that is going to be an eye-opening experience for both of these combatants. I think it's going to be a great fight. Not the one we wanted, but it is a good one.
Yeah, and I think you're being very, very, very generous when you say this isn't the fight we wanted. But I think, Marissa, with these comments, you guys take my thoughts right out of my mouth. I was just about to say, with boxing, first off, there's 100 champions, 100 different promotions, 100 different weight classes. No one's keeping up with all that. But let's be fair. Ugas, am I saying that right?
Yep.
Ugas was on the undercard of this fight, and I believe his opponent actually pulled out with a torn retina in his eye as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if the athletic commission is just telling everyone has a torn retina if they wanted this fight to begin with. But I believe Ugas was going to be the one who had to unify this fight afterwards anyway. So Pacquiao was probably going to have to fight him if he went through Spence, which I don't think he was. But nonetheless, I do think with boxing, there's so many promoters. And even with all the promoters, these guys don't have a name. I can't pronounce his first name. I'm not going to try to pronounce his first name. His last name is cool, Ugas. I feel like you can get a lot of marketing and a lot of people behind that. And you have a guy like Manny Pacquiao who's now about to take on what to the casual eye would be a no-name fighter. He's a champion. He's the champ. He's defending the belt in this scenario, which is weird because, like you said, Pacquiao's on a 2-year layoff. I saw that he has to fight in this slot since he is, in the government and he's a senator. He can't just be fighting any old date. Can't just give him a date. So when he does get a date and has time off to prepare, he has to stay here. So we don't know if we'll see the Spence fight if he loses. And not for nothing, another viral Manny Pacquiao knockout would be awesome to watch. I thought that's what was coming. Not for nothing, but prayers up for Errol Spence. Hopefully his eye's okay. I saw Michael Bisping giving him some advice. And hopefully we get this fight made. If Pacquiao does get through Ugas, we can see him fight Errol Spence one day in the near future.
Spence should fight the winner of this. And I see our guy Chris Hanrahan in the comments saying Michael Conlan, pound for pound. Dorian, if you don't know, Michael Conlan, a great boxer from Ireland. A little bit of a different career trajectory than I think people thought, but a great fighter nonetheless. But to get back on track, to talk about this fight, it's a little complex because there's a lot to it. Ugas, there were rumors back in April and May that Ugas would be the one to unify the belts against Spence for that August 21st date. Didn't work out. Ugas still was supposed to fight on this card, and then Fabian Maidana had a torn retina, so that fight was scrapped. The interesting part about Pacquiao and Ugas fighting one another, for one, Pacquiao is still fighting for a belt. He's still the challenger, so it makes no difference. And secondly, this was the belt, the WBA title, was the one Pacquiao had until it was vacated. And lo and behold, the guy who won that vacated belt was Yordenis Ugas. So there are a lot of interesting story elements to this fight that I think makes it so compelling. Will it draw as many pay-per-views as it would if Errol Spence was fighting? Absolutely not. I'm not going to sit here and act like it will. But this will be a very good fight. I think this will be very competitive. Right now, I don't have a prediction for it. Maybe next week's episode we could, because it'll happen a few days before that fight. But, man, this is going to be a fight that it might not be worth the price tag of $74.99. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But I think it's going to be a very good fight. I think those who will be in attendance in Las Vegas, I think they're going to get their money's worth that night. If Yordenis Ugas wins this bout against Manny Pacquiao, which I'm sure some people think he will and could, Yordenis Ugas will start to become a bigger name in the welterweight division. I'm not saying he's going to be a household name, but I think he's going to be a name along the lines of someone like a Sean Porter, who he fought, someone like Danny Garcia, names that might not be massive names to the casual fan, but for boxing fans, they're well-known names. So I think if Ugas wins this, he will have a unification bout against Spence whenever Spence is healthy.
You say that if he does beat Manny, you don't think he'll become a household name. I actually disagree. I think if you beat Manny Pacquiao, then yeah, you're now a household name. And not only will you be able to beat Pacquiao, you'll then be able to have another big name in his next fight against Spence. Obviously, if the retina heals up properly and he's able to train and stuff. But you have Pacquiao and Spence in back-to-back fights, you will become a household name, in my opinion.
All right, well, what about Jeff Horn? Because Jeff Horn beat Pacquiao. You could say it's controversial, but he beat Pacquiao. And then in 2 fights after that, fought Terrence Crawford. You haven't heard anything from Jeff Horn. And I'm not comparing Jeff Horn to Yordenis-Ugas, but I just think it really depends on who is fighting Manny Pacquiao. I think that holds precedence. But I do agree with you, though. I do think Yordenis-Ugas, when it's all said and done, if he wins and then he fights Spence, his stock will rise. I agree with you on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, like he might not be like a Tyson Fury household name, and yeah, that is another thing. Beating Manny at this age may not do it. So I get it. And that was a very controversial match. I do remember it now that you mentioned it. But haven't heard anything from him since.
No.
But, a couple guys we have heard from, and we'll stick with boxing here. We're moving on now. Oscar De La Hoya and Vitor Belfort. We talked a little bit about it. They're having their Triller main event September 11th. We now have, I don't know if it's co-main, if it's just on the card, we have another big name boxer by the name of Anderson the Spider Silva. It's facetious if you guys don't know. He's an MMA god. But he's going up against Tito Ortiz. Now, for me, this blew me away because I thought he was about to fight or box Logan Paul. Mm-hmm. And now he's boxing Tito Ortiz, and they're on the De La Hoya Belfort card. And I don't know, man. All I'm going to say is shouts out Triller. They put together big name fights, whether we like them or not, whether boxing likes them or not. They put on big name fights. They have big names. What's your takes on that fight?
For Tito Ortiz, I hate this fight. To me, this just seems like a money grab. For Anderson Silva, it makes a ton of sense. Anderson Silva, he's retired from MMA, trying to get into boxing because many people don't know this. Anderson Silva was a pro. He had a pro bout in 2006. And then obviously in June, he fought Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., won that fight as well. For him, it makes sense. For Tito, I don't see how it makes sense. Tito has not fought a professional boxing match in his career. An MMA fighter who I think his best MMA days passed him around 2009 to 2011 in that range.
You're being generous.
Yeah, maybe 2007 was the end of Tito Ortiz as we knew him being a dominant light heavyweight. But Triller, I think they're trying to get big names, and for that I commend them. But for Tito Ortiz, I don't like this fight. I don't see where he beats Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva just beat a former world champion in Chavez Jr. You can say Chavez Jr. is over the hill, which I think he is, but he's still a former champion. And that takes a lot of skill to do. But Anderson Silva should win this fight against Tito Ortiz handily. I thought Anderson Silva should have fought Logan Paul. I thought that would have been a tremendous fight. I would have favored Anderson Silva in that bout against Paul, but I think it would have been a lot more competitive than a fight against someone like Tito Ortiz, who Ortiz has not really been known to be a great boxer. Yes, he's had power in MMA, but he started out as a wrestler, has a great submission game in MMA. How is that going to translate into boxing? I don't know. Dorian, Tito Ortiz is not someone like Vitor Belfort, who's a knockout artist. He's not someone like Anderson Silva, who's arguably the greatest striker in MMA history. I think he's going into this for the wrong reasons. I understand you can't take the fight out of the fighter, but this is just a bad optical look for Tito Ortiz, in my opinion.
Now that you say that, the Huntington Beach bad boy is about to get beat down. And I'd have Silva in this anyway. You'll never catch me picking against Anderson Silva in anything for any reason, but specifically in a boxing match. Like you said, Tito's not a striker, Anderson just beat a former world champion, second generation athlete. And like, it just got swept under the rug. Like, no one cares anymore. Because when he was going to fight Logan Paul, they were saying, "Oh, you were boxing real boxers. Now you want to box Logan." Well, now he's boxing. Yeah, I don't think Tito's going to become a real boxer anytime soon. No. I don't think he's going to be a real boxer after this. And I'm thinking about it. I don't know what's worse. Tito Ortiz boxing Anderson Silva or Tyron Woodley boxing Jake Paul. I don't know which one's worse. I think this might be worse. From just a career perspective, Tito hasn't done anything in the last few years. Obviously, he had his run with Bellator way past his prime, obviously. But you're just basically coming off the couch to box Anderson, who's been competitive these last few years. That's a bad move, man. That's almost as bad as T Wood boxing Jake Paul, in my opinion.
This is much worse than Tyron Woodley boxing Jake Paul, because at least Tyron, although he was a world-class wrestler at Missouri, he knows how to box. Tito, just a few months ago, was a political figure in Huntington Beach. That didn't work out. And then now he's going back into boxing. I'm sorry. I just don't see why there is an appeal to this. For Triller, I get it. But if I'm Triller, I'm trying to pair Anderson Silva in there with somebody else. Someone not like Tito Ortiz. And I know Tito Ortiz has a relationship with Oscar De La Hoya, which is most likely why he's even on his undercard, because Tito Ortiz actually fought Chuck Liddell on the inaugural Golden Boy MMA fight back in November 2018. So I understand the relationship part.
By the way,
terrible fight, and this one might be even worse. And look, it pains me to say this about Tito Ortiz because he's a pioneer in the UFC, but his days have passed him. I'm just going to call a spade here. I don't see where he's going to outbox Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva, to me, I think is going to own the ring that night, and I think he's going to make quick work of Tito Ortiz. I don't see how this is a very competitive fight, especially because it's 8 rounds. Anderson Silva was fighting in the UFC just last October, and then he competed in a boxing match that went the distance against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. He's prepared for 8 rounds. Tito, is he prepared for 8 rounds? I don't know, because the guy was just running a political campaign, and now you're going to box Anderson Silva? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think this has a dog walking written all over it. I think Anderson's going to play with him like he used to do in MMA, hands down, shaking his head, little Roy Jones-esque. More pay-per-view, I think. Honestly, Anderson Silva, not for nothing.
Yeah.
T Wood was never a draw in the UFC for whatever the case may be, whether it was his own promoter and boss Dana publicly criticizing him for winning or, whatever the case may be. But I think the public loves Anderson Silva. The public doesn't love Tyron Woodley. MMA fans love Tyron Woodley, and MMA, the community is probably rooting for him against Jake Paul. But I think Anderson Silva's beloved. Like, if you know who he is, you love Anderson Silva. I've never met anyone who's had anything negative to say about Anderson Silva, except Chael Sonnen, to be honest.
And Chael likes Anderson Silva now. The dream matchup for me, and where I think Triller dropped the ball, not having Anderson Silva fight Roy Jones Jr. Maybe there was a scheduling conflict, but Anderson Silva and Roy Jones Jr. were supposed to fight in the 2000s, but Dana White put the kibosh to it. That fight never happened. And Roy Jones Jr. just fought his last fight on Triller. So he can't fight Anderson Silva now. I just think they dropped the ball. I don't want to say no disrespect, because I guess I did disrespect Tito Ortiz. But come on, Triller. Why couldn't you make the Roy Jones Jr. fight happen? That would make all the sense in the world. Anderson Silva, Roy Jones Jr., that's a terrific bout.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned it, I believe, like, Anderson said that Roy is one of his favorite like fighters just overall, not just boxers, but just fighters. And they have similar styles, very flashy showmen, both older in the latter parts of their careers are done. Let's be real. They're retired. But yeah, I agree with you actually. Now I think about it, Roy Jones would have been a nice little addition to this card. But then again, you might have to save Roy Jones for the main event. You can't have Roy Jones as a co-main. That would be so disrespectful.
But Oscar's there. That's why I don't think it's disrespectful, because Oscar is fighting. And Oscar, I think, takes precedence over Roy Jones.
So give Roy his own card. Let Silva walk through Tito, and then we'll get Roy Jones back in here. I think he should be nice and healed up from that beating Tyson put on him. But speaking of retired guys, we can transition to the next one. This one hurt my heart, man, my soul. The MMA community as a whole, we lost one. We kind of saw this coming. I think me and you called it after his last fight against Muniz. He got his arm snapped. Ronaldo Jacare Souza has officially retired from MMA. Those who you don't know, he is always going to be one of the most feared guys on the ground. His nickname is Jacare. That's all you have to say. For those who don't know that, that's I believe Portuguese or Brazilian for crocodile, because he's that lethal. When he puts his hands on you, you're not getting up, unless you're Kevin Holland. And then if you get up, you make a highlight. And I don't know. It hurt my heart to hear he was retiring, but he's 41 now. Obviously, his best days are behind him. He won't be fighting for a strap. The UFC let him go. So there's a whole bunch of snowball effect, obviously, with the broken arm. I'm sad, Mike.
I'm sad as well, Dorian. I think if you're a real MMA fan out there like you and I are, it's kind of the end of an era, because Jacare was part of that mid-2000, that decade, and then he was in Strike Force
guys.
Yeah, it's tough to see guys like that go, but it's the right decision. Jacare, I would say his best days are well past him at this point. And to see him lose to Muniz in the way he did, where his elbow was just destroyed, and to see him still kind of be happy about it, to me was very odd. But that just goes to show how much of a savage he is. But nonetheless, I think it's time for him and to step away, and he made the right decision. I don't think you can dispute that. What really stood out to me in the last year for Jacare was the Kevin Holland fight. He out-wrestled Kevin Holland for a good portion of the fight because he's a phenomenal grappler. And then he managed to give up position by standing up in the guard, and then he gets knocked out by Kevin Holland, who's from the bottom position. That to me was when I was like, all right, you know what? It might be time for Jacare to hang it up sooner than later. And I'm glad he's doing this now, because you never want to see somebody take any more physical damage. And Jacare was at a point in his career where he was kind of going down instead of up. And it comes with the territory of getting older in MMA. Not too many fighters age gracefully. And Jacare, this was just another example of a legend just starting to fall back on his back, so to speak. And I'm glad he went out the way he did, as opposed to him losing in brutal fashion. So I think in a way he went out how he was supposed to, kind of on his own merit, although he was released. And he gets to ride off in the sunset, so to speak.
I mean, yeah, I agree with everything you said except the last one. I do think that was brutal fashion, getting your arm broke, even though he was cheesing. You know, he's cheesing because he's gotten his arm broken in jiu-jitsu tournaments. I saw he had his arm broken against one of the Gracies, and the Gracies was saying, hey, his arm's broken. And he ended up winning the match on points and won the IBBJJ World title of 1 year, a super huge grappling tournament that only him and the Gracies would ever win. But yeah, like you said, he's lost his last 4, not for nothing, but against top level guys. Like, he's not one of the older guys who was fighting, you know, like gatekeeping, as we like to call it. He wasn't gatekeeping. He was still fighting the top level guys.
Yep.
His last 4, Jack Hermanson, who's a top 10 middleweight now. He fought Jan, who's the champ now.
2019.
Kevin Holland, obviously one of the craziest knockouts you'll ever see. I feel comfortable saying the rest of my life, I don't think I'll see anyone get knocked out like that again. And if so, it only happened one more time. And then obviously Andre Muniz with the brutal arm broke. But we're not here to talk about his losses. Let's talk about his wins. He's beating, guys like Tim Kennedy. He slept Chris Weidman. He knocked out Derek Brunson once in Strikeforce, came to the UFC, knocked him out again. I think he knocked out Vitor too, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. Submitted tons of dudes, choked out Robbie Lawler, Ed Herman, the current Bellator middleweight champion, actually, Gegard Mousasi, who's fighting and defending his middleweight strap, also got submitted by Jacare. So anybody who's worth anything in the middleweight division, he's put his hands on you. Let's be real. So, yeah, man, it sucks to see a guy like that go out. And ironically, that was his first submission loss in MMA, and he's retiring. I do like to see that because it's like, I'm all-time great grappler. If you can submit me, I'll retire. I feel like it was that kind of like macho bravado type thing. If anybody who submit me, I'll retire. And he got submitted, and now he's retired. Granted, I doubt that was his brain working like that, but it's good to see him walk away under his own power. Hopefully his arm's healed up nice, and, he'll get healthy. Hopefully he can play with his kids if he has any. We don't want to see any further damage like, we see a lot of other guys taken before they get released by the UFC. But just want to salute Jacare Souza. I'm a lot more sad to see you go than I was to see Paul Felder. Don't ask me why I just took a shot at Paul Felder. I don't know.
Hey, come on, I just caught a stray.
But yeah, is what it is. But I will say, Jacare, legend, is one of the greatest fighters to not win a UFC belt. I think we can agree with that. I know he's the Strikeforce middleweight champ, which is kind of UFC now, but we're not going to count that. But one strap we will count on is that UFC heavyweight gold, interim gold only, because we know Francis is the real king, like he said. Ciryl Gane, Derek Lewis fought this weekend, guys. I'm here to apologize. Posted the clip earlier on my Twitter. My bad, Gane. Not that I didn't think you could win, but I didn't think you'd do it like that, man. Like, he made Derek Lewis look amateur, and I'm being respectful. I think the strike count was 122-19. That's ridiculous. That's 6 times more punches and significant strikes landed, period. And not for nothing, those 19 significant strikes weren't significant for Derek Lewis. Yeah, Dash knows main card struggles. For those of you guys who don't know, we had our picks, and I had the whole prelims picked correctly. And then I got the first fight, the Song Yadong, right. I got that one right. And the rest of the main card, straight L's for me. So I'm here. The floor is yours, Mike. Let's break down 265.
I'm not here to say I told you so, but I told you so. I just thought there was so much pressure on Derek Lewis. And what scared me, and if I was someone who was either betting on Derek Lewis or picking him to beat Ciryl Gane, it was the week of the fight. He was saying, I'm running more. I'm taking this more serious than I have any other fight. That was a little alarming to me, because why are you changing what got you to the dance? And look, it showed the night of the fight. He was completely neutralized. Yes, he threw some decently big bombs, I would say, at Ciryl Gane, but it was only when Gane would turn his back just to change position and get right in front of Lewis to drive him backwards. That was really the only time there was any sort of activity. He was puzzled. He didn't really know what to do. And Derek Lewis is notorious for being a slow starter. And there's always that feeling when he fights, all right, he'll turn it on eventually. Eventually never came. Ciryl Gane just picked him apart. His movement just, I think, confused Derek Lewis. Lewis didn't know how to handle it. Gane, in my opinion, is the best, I guess, fluid boxer, I would say. Just the way he's able to get in and out of the pocket, kind of work out, and not get any damage. There was one point in time in the fight where I thought Lewis had an opportunity to kind of tee off on Gane, and he just didn't let his hands go. And if you try to outbox Gane, guess what? He's just going to stand with you all night, pick his shots, kind of work his foot movement, and just pin you up against the cage and just tee off. And that's exactly what happened. It just showed that there are levels to heavyweight championship fighting, and Ciryl Gane's the real deal. Ciryl Gane is ready for the big time. And you know what, Dorian? Another thing I have to bring up. When I knew Ciryl Gane was ready for this, when he walked out in Houston, Texas to Still Tippin' by Mike Jones, confused the crowd. The crowd was like, oh my God, Derek Lewis is here. And they're like, oh no, that's Ciryl Gane. Let's boo him. A master chess move on his part. Ciryl Gane has the goods, and he is ready to take the crown at heavyweight.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the absolute troll job of walking out the Still Tippin', he said he did that on purpose to troll. And then also, I don't know if you saw after the fight, he tweets a picture of him walking away from Derek Lewis after he's been knocked out. And he's sitting on the stool, and he tweets hashtag he is okay.
Yeah.
Because those of you guys who don't know, Derek Lewis on his Instagram, every caption it's just like a funny video of some dude falling, then he's okay. Or it's a picture of him and he's like, I'm okay. So he always says, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. So I thought Gane, masterful trolling Ciryl. If you're watching, great job with the intro music. From the intro music to the walkout to when he got in the octagon. And everything was just, like you said, very calculated, very measured. I think he might be the best point fighter I've seen since John Jones. And that I don't just throw that out there lightly. I want to be very thorough when I say point fighting is a skill. I think Max,
let's get into it.
We should. I'm here. I'm on the Gane train. I'm driving it now. Mike has to take a step to the side. He can be co-captain.
Oh, go on. Wow.
I'm driving the Gane train. No,
okay.
Because what he showed me was so much more than just the fight. It was the whole total package. It was from the intro music to the walkout. Just looked calm. Didn't look like it was getting to him. I spoke last week about it. If the pressure gets to him, what if when they start booing, he tries the firefight? Nope, none of that. I'm in your hometown. I'm going to beat you up, and I'm going to take the belt that you were supposed to get when you fought Francis, but you had to fight me. And made a mistake. 112-16 was the strike count. I'm looking now. 112 punches, kicks, and elbows and knees to 16. That's crazy. And
that
like
landed?
you said, yes, 112 landed to
Wow.
16 landed for Derek Lewis. He threw 136. So he only missed 24 total shots. He missed more shots than Derek Lewis landed.
That's insane.
I wish I could put that in perspective for the fans, but I can't. That you just have to realize just think of it like this. I hit you 11 times, you hit me 1 time. And play spoiler alert if you guys didn't see it. His 1 time hitting Gane every 11 wasn't very effective, didn't do any damage. But yeah, like I was saying, he's very calculated from the walkout to troll to finishing the fight. I'm surprised that he got the finish because I'm like, okay, it's the 3rd round. It's towards the end of the round. You know, he's about to turn up the pace a little bit in the fourth round. And I also thought Derek Lewis was about to start letting his hands go in the fourth round. And then he was like, no, this isn't getting to the bell anymore. And he finished him in the third round. And that's what I was calling for. And a lot of fans like me were saying, if you want to be a champ and you want to be a fan favorite, you can't be labeled a boring fighter. So point fighting, it'll work, but you need to get those finishes. He didn't go for the finish against Jairzinho Rosenstruck, and he didn't go for the finish against Alex Volkov. He's just point fighting. For the title, he went for the finish, and I love it. And he trolled after. I love a good troll. Everyone loves a good troll. So, Francis, you got your hands full, man.
Francis is in trouble. Let's just be honest, especially if Francis tries to fight as calm Francis, then you're playing right into Cyryl's game, because that's what Ciryl does. Ciryl, like you said, that point fighting, kind of stick and move, get in the pocket, get out, use the art of hitting and not getting hit. If Francis tries to be calm Francis, I think that's where he's in trouble, because it's hard to out-jab Ciryl Gane. I don't think he's going to be able to do that. I think Francis's best bet is to come out of the gates throwing his hurricane-like shots. I think that's his best shot, because
just rush him.
Yeah, he has to bull rush him. I think that's his only chance, because you're not going to fight Ciryl Gane tactically, especially when you really only have one fight experience of fighting that way, that style against Stipe. Ciryl, this is all he's done. And also Ciryl has a lot of submissions as well on his record. Cyryl's capable, if he finds a way to get that fight against Francis to the ground, he might go for a submission, because he knows the power that Francis has standing on the feet. That might behoove Ciryl Gane to get it to the ground, try to get that neck, and submit Francis. It's not impossible for Ciryl Gane to be able to submit Francis, especially if Francis is vulnerable when it comes to leaving himself open for a takedown and allowing his neck to be strangled.
Yeah, and I mean, if not for nothing, but they used to be training partners.
Yep.
And apparently they were training as recently as May. So before the Gane Lewis fight got booked, they were training together still.
Yep.
And I think that Francis might have seen what was going on, seen the way Gane was moving in the practice room, and saw the way that the UFC was, he just had a main event. Because when Francis beat Biggie Boy, not for nothing, he rushed him and knocked him out cold. But after that, it was, okay, Francis, you have a title shot now. They should have did an interim title for that, because that was the Stipe DC trilogy.
Yep.
Let's wait 3 years before we defend the belt against anybody else. But anywho, another story for another day. We don't have to talk about the interim belt. I'm happy they did it now. Cyryl's a champ, as he should be. But I think when he fought Rosenstruck, he won. He got a title shot. He saw Ciryl fight Biggie Boy, beat him the way he did. He's probably thinking, I don't know if I want to keep sparring with this guy who might be coming for the same title I plan on holding. So Francis leaves the gym, and now Cyryl's kind of like, yo, I'm the face of French MMA. And I get Francis isn't from France. He just trained in France. Obviously he's from Cameroon, I believe, in Africa.
Yep.
So he doesn't claim to be French. Ciryl is French MMA right now. And just having that type of backing behind him is something Francis probably doesn't want to deal with. So I don't think they're going to fight abroad. If they do, it's going to be maybe on Fight Island, where it's a neutral ground. But if they were to open the borders and, with, say, in a COVID-free world, if they were to fight in France, I don't think Francis would like that, because I think they'd be on Gane's side, not for nothing. It'll be tough, though.
You know what? I don't necessarily know if it would be entirely all about Ciryl Gane. I do think you would have a contingent of support for Francis Ngannou. I do think it would be outweighed by the number of folks who would be there for Ciryl Gane. But it would be a massive fight, because you have two guys who have trained in France, and I feel like Francis has kind of taken France as his surrogate home, I guess you could say. That's his home, away from home, from Cameroon. And the fight is going to be big wherever it is, because now you have 2 belts on the line, not just one, and you're fighting for the undisputed title. Back in June, when the Ciryl Gane Derek Lewis fight was announced, at first I wasn't a fan of it, but I turned around on it because I realized the winner of the interim belt, that would only make that fight between the winner of the interim title and Francis even bigger. And that's what's going to happen. So now you have 2 guys who are massive stars, whether it's in France, Abu Dhabi, the US, it doesn't matter. It's going to be a massive event because the winner of this fight will most likely take on either Jon Jones or Stipe Miocic. And that will be maybe even a bigger fight than the one with Francis.
Let's open up Pandora's box here.
Let's do it.
Travel back to 2017. Robert Whittaker beats Yoel Romero for the interim title. Michael Bisping is the middleweight champ. Just won it off Luke Rockhold. Not going to defend it. I'll fight Hendo. No, not defending it. Okay, I'm hurt. Okay. They had GSP and Bisping lined up and had them fight, even though Whittaker was the interim champ. Now, I know Dana is saying that, Ciryl and Francis is the fight to make, and it just makes all sense. Training partners, both from France, blah, 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 blah. Got it. If Jon Jones comes around and they can figure out the business dealings or whatever the case is between them, pay Jon his $30 million. What if Jon Jones takes on Francis and Ciryl waits around? Because Ciryl said that I believe he just had a daughter, or he's about to have a daughter within the week or so, and he wants to take some time off. He's been very active. Obviously, he fought Volkov in June, and then he's right back around in August for a strap. So what if Cyryl's like, let me take some time off. I can fight Francis maybe top of the year or middle of the year, maybe summerish, early summerish, and they let Francis fight Jon Jones. I wouldn't be opposed to that because I thought that was the fight to make from the beginning. But it's hard to say if I would like it being made, even though I want it to be made. I don't know. What do you think about that? If Francis fought Jon right now and just left Ciryl as the interim champ?
I think it would be a terrible idea because it's a little bit different than the scenario in 2017 with Robert Whittaker, because Whittaker was hurt and GSP and Bisping were supposed to fight in the summer that year. There was an injury. It got postponed and delayed until November of that year. In this scenario, though, I just think you gave Ciryl Gane, or you allowed Ciryl Gane to fight for the interim title for a reason, so that his next fight would be for the undisputed title. And from everything I've heard and we've all heard, it doesn't sound like Jon Jones is going to fight anytime soon. I think your best bet is just to book Ciryl Gane, Francis Ngannou next, and then have them fight Jon Jones. I understand Ciryl. He had a child. Congratulations to him on that. But my man, you just won the interim belt. Within the next year, I think it would be great for you to fight for the undisputed title. Look, Jon Jones, I don't want to say the ship has sailed, but to me, I think he should fight Stipe. Because in terms of the business side, Ciryl, Francis is the fight to make. Jon Jones, he kind of did it to himself by vacating that light heavyweight title and taking the risk of moving up to heavyweight. This comes with the territory now. Sorry, Jon, you're not in control anymore. You have to play by the UFC's rules now. You're not the shot caller at 206 plus pounds anymore. You have to abide by a different set of rules. So I think Jon Jones either fights Stipe Miocic or he fights the winner.
See, the reason let me preface this by saying, what's today? Today is August 12th, 2021. I think Jon Jones is a retired fighter. Let me put that on Front Street. I think Jon Jones retired when he vacated his belt. I think he still trains MMA, stay in shape. You know, he's bulking up to see if he wants a heavyweight move. Let's be real. I believe John is retired, personally. Now, with that said, maybe that's why he priced himself out of the Francis fight. Don't really want to fight Francis. Give me 30 mil, I'll fight him. Yeah, of course. But for the Stipe thing, I know Dana says that's the fight that, you know, everybody wants, and Stipe accepted it already. Let's be real. Stipe being the heavyweight GOAT and John being the light heavyweight GOAT, no quotations, that would have to be a main event, right? And there's no belt on the line. So you're not putting John Jones and Stipe on a fight night. You know, that has to be a pay-per-view. So my thing is, if from the business side, obviously Dana knows well as anybody, most pay-per-views, you need a title to main event. That's why they put the interim belt up, so Derek Lewis can main event and it not be Nunes Pena for the main event. Obviously, Nunes Pena got pulled because Amanda got COVID. But if they didn't put a strap for Gane and Lewis, they would have been the co-main. So we know the business side and how that works. Do you run the risk of running a pay-per-view like a Conor-style pay-per-view where you're just, you know, it's Conor, so he can main event? Because John Jones doesn't sell those type of numbers. Obviously not the same as Conor. No one sells like Conor, but I remember they did it for the Masvidal, Nate Diaz. They even put the BMF belt. They made up a belt just so they could headline. And it's like, when you have two huge stars, Nate Diaz being one of them, Jorge being another now, you have to put them on main event. So if you book John and Stipe, it's going to have to be a main event on a pay-per-view for no belt. I don't think that's likely to happen. That's why I don't see why they're even going in that direction. I think if John comes back, it has to be for a strap.
It's not likely to happen, but with John Jones, whether there's a title on the line or not, in terms of pay-per-view buys, I don't think it makes a difference, because the most amount of pay-per-views he's ever sold was around 800,000 for the Cormier rematch in 2017. He's not a big-time selling guy. If you were to get Stipe in there, I think it would sell pretty well. And I think you could make it a title eliminator, because although John is not the star that Conor McGregor is, when it's all said and done, John Jones arguably will be the greatest fighter of all time. I think if there is one person you can put a pay-per-view on for a belt, it is John Jones. With that being said, though, I don't think John Jones and Stipe is going to happen. I more so threw it out there because there's really nothing else for him to fight other than fighting for the title, but he would have to wait. If he doesn't want to wait, that's the fight for him to take, but I don't think he's going to take it. I think at this point in time, John Jones, and Dana White has said this on multiple occasions, the best way for a fighter to not take a fight or to say that they don't want to fight is to price themselves out. And that's what John did. John said, look, I want $10 million. This isn't 2011 anymore for John Jones. He's not getting $10 million to fight. If anything, Francis would get $10 million.
Yeah, I think I'm such a John fan. I want to see him fight again, but everything is just pointing at the fact that I truly, truly, truly believe he's retired. I don't think that he even wants to fight anymore. He's just keeping his name relevant because it's good for him, I guess. But at the same time, what does he have to prove? I don't think John has anything to prove personally.
No, he doesn't have anything to prove, because I think a lot of people have him ahead of Khabib and ahead of George St. Pierre on the all-time list. What this would do, though, is cushion that lead that he has ahead of them, especially if he wins a heavyweight title, because he started his career in the UFC as a heavyweight. So it would kind of be a good bookend for him to start out as a heavyweight and more or less end his career as a heavyweight, because I don't see him dropping down to 205. Not only do I think it would be hard for him to make the weight, but there's too much risk. Are you going to run the risk of fighting someone like Jan Blachowicz or Yuri Prohaska, Glover Teixeira? The risk, the upside, it's not worth it, in my opinion. For heavyweight, though, I think this would pad that lead, like I just said, and it would cement his status as the greatest of all time. I think that's the main reason why he's doing it, for legacy as well as a bigger payday, because his next fight at heavyweight, he will get paid much more than he would if it was at light heavyweight.
Agreed, yeah. I think as far as the pay goes, he's not going to get what he commanded in his prime. Obviously, he's not in his prime anymore, but at the same time, he's still a draw. You said 800,000 is his biggest buy. 800,000 pay-per-views is a lot.
That's
like if Dana could guarantee every single pay-per-view does 800, he would take that. So, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to see him coming back and fighting Stipe. The only reason that I personally can think of that he would fight Stipe is not in the title eliminator. It's John Jones. We know he don't need to eliminate nobody. We know he's the people's champ. I think if he were to beat, or if he were to take the fight against Stipe, it would strictly be just to simply piss off Daniel Cormier and be like, hey, I beat the dude who beat you twice. Like, I think that alone, just the pure pettiness of John Jones would allow him to take that fight against Stipe. But I don't think he does, because for what? Why would I have to take a fight against, a guy who just lost the belt, and I'm going to beat him and then I have to wait for the belt, or I can just wait for the belt? The champ's calling him out. I said this before. If the champ's calling you out, you are the number one contender. It doesn't matter, in my opinion.
Yeah, it shouldn't matter. And I'll just say this quickly so we can move on to the other fights. John Jones is at a point in his career where there's just a lot of dark clouds surrounding his legacy. And I think being able to be the heavyweight champion, but doing it in a clean fashion where there aren't any picograms, there aren't any personal issues, I think if he does that, that's the best thing for his career.
I can agree with that. And we can move on. I don't even know how we got on a John Jones tangent here. He didn't fight at 265. But another legend who did fight at 265, I also owe an apology to. Damn, I'm apologizing to everybody right now.
Apology tour.
Yeah, I'm on a PR run right now. Jose Aldo. My bad, man. I thought you was over the hill. I thought it was over for you. I thought Munoz was putting you out of business, and I couldn't have been any more wrong. I don't think Munoz thought that he would check a kick, because when he checked a couple of them, Munoz stopped throwing them, and it looked like that was his whole game plan. It was probably to immobilize Aldo and then box him. Didn't work. Kicks got checked. MMA fighters out there, watch Jose Aldo check a calf kick. It can be done. Don't listen to people who say you can't check it or just get out the way. You can check a kick. You can check anything that comes to you. Aldo checked it and outboxed Pedro like nobody's business. My apologies. I thought Pedro was going to walk him like a dog, but I was wrong. It is what it is.
Jose Aldo, he's still here, Dorian. He's not the same fighter that he was. I think that goes without saying. But to outclass Pedro Munoz in the way that he did, it's terrific. And he's still a live dog in the bantamweight division. He can't be counted out. Do I think he's going to get back to a title fight? No, I don't. But I think Jose Aldo still has a lot more to give MMA than people think. The way he was able to just get in and out of the pocket, let his hands go, rip the body of Munoz, it was critical to him getting the win. Many people thought Munoz would be able to crack him. That never happened. The way he was able to just kind of move his head, get out of harm's way, just outpoint someone like Pedro Munoz, it shows that Jose Aldo can stay in there with the top dogs in the bantamweight division. Because if you look at the bantamweight division, Dorian, it is stacked. And Jose Aldo is part of the reason why it is stacked, because he's 34 years old. He may be the oldest looking 34-year-old on the planet. If I didn't know Jose Aldo was 34, I would say he's 41. But he doesn't fight like he's 34. He fights like he's 26. And the way he moved is the way he looked against Marlon Chito Vera. That was a fight that proved to me that Jose can still hang in there with the best of them. His striking is still there. His grappling was great in the Chito Vera fight. He didn't have to grapple as much against Munoz because it was typically just a stand and bang bout. But that option was still there to grapple. And he made the most of the opportunity. Jose Aldo, I can't wait to see who he fights next. I don't see him fighting, I would say, one of the top bantamweights, especially someone like TJ Dillashaw, because Dillashaw at this point, he's waiting for a title fight. So that fight wouldn't make sense. But maybe a Dominic Cruz fight. That would be a terrific fight. There are a few other fights out there. So I don't know. I think there are options out there for Jose Aldo, but hats off to Aldo. He had a terrific performance, and he just showed that he's not slowing down.
Yeah, not for nothing. It seems like Aldo's 30 wins, 7 losses, and he's lost. We've seen him lose 6 out of his last 10. So it seems as if he's like on a downward trajectory. But if you look at it, he only loses to the top guys. Yep. Like he got smoked by Conor, obviously. Then he loses to Max twice. Max is arguably the 45 GOAT. I don't think it's really arguable, but it is what it is. Then smokes Jeremy Stevens, smokes Moicano. Then you lose to Alex Volkanovski, sorry. Okay, understandable. He's now the 45 champ. He's kind of the guy who pushed you out the 45 division. Then you lose to Marlon Moraes. A lot of people thought he won that fight. Is what it is. And then you lose to Peter Yan. It's like, okay, Peter Yan's the champ. But everybody else he beats. If you're not the champ or you can't win the belt, Aldo's going to beat you. And now that I know that, I'm never going to bet against him again unless it's a title fight. But moving on, the last fight I do want to talk about on this card, I had fight of the year, fight of the night, best scrap of the night, whatever you want to call it, written all over this. And not for nothing, it was a really good scrap for the 3-4 minutes that it lasted. Vicente Luque, a.k.a. the GSP killer, against Michael Chiesa. Now, I had Chiesa. I was flipping back and forth. It was a pick'em, but Chiesa got his back, had him, and I've never seen anyone get out from under Chiesa like that, and especially to submit him after. I did see afterwards he did say that he folded under pressure. The bright lights got to him, one of the biggest moments of his career, and he folded, which is unusual to see because he has been a main event fighter, main evented against Neil Magny. So I don't know why he thought being the third fight on a pay-per-view card would be the biggest, but I guess with the fans back and stuff like that, he's getting reacclimated. So hopefully Chiesa's doing all right, But yeah, man, it was a good scrap. Shouts out Luque. He has to throw his name in the hat for that welterweight top 5. I think if he gets a guy like Masvidal next and he can beat Jorge, he might be next in line for a belt. After Leon Edwards, of course, because we know who's really next in line. And I want to say this real quick before you go. Gilbert Burns is his teammate. They trained together. He cornered him for this fight. He's cornered him 100,000 times before. Gilbert Burns said he didn't want to fight Luque because they were teammates. But yet Gilbert Burns fought Kamaru Usman, and they were teammates. But it's different because it's for the belt. But he won't fight Luque if it's not for the belt. I think that's a great match to make. Burns and Luque. That could be a title eliminator right there. But not trying to get too far ahead. Chiesa Luque, what were your thoughts on that fight, Mike?
First and foremost, Dorian, I don't trust Burns' word when it comes to that because he's out for his. And can you blame him? No. You have to be selfish. So for him, look, If Luque's in the way, I'm sorry. I think you got to fight him. With that being said, though, you talked about the date earlier. You said it was August 12th. So that means there's about 4 months left in the calendar year. I am going to go out on a limb and say that round between Luque and Chiesa is the round of the year. And you can make an argument that Luque's fight against Tyron Woodley was also a round of the year. This guy, oh my God, like this guy just has crazy starts to his fights and then just finishes them. And he's a
finisher.
And that wasn't always how he really went about his career, especially in the UFC, where he would get hurt or his neck would be taken advantage of. He would give up position and then boom, flip around, reverse. Like it is crazy. If you look at the Woodley fight, he was hurt, ended up submitting Woodley. Against Chiesa, he said that Chiesa had that guillotine about 80% locked in.
Yeah.
80% locked in against Michael Chiesa. There aren't too many guys who can get out of that, but Vicente Luque can. And that's why I think this is the round of the year, because there was a moment in time where I said, Michael Chiesa, he's got this fight. He's going to win it. He has his back, has his neck. It was locked in pretty tight underneath the chin. No way Luque's going to get out. Luque got out. Not only did he get out, won in the top position, found his way to Chiesa's back, and then choked him out. It is insane how Vicente Luque was able to do that. That's why I think you have to give him round of the year, whether it's this fight or the Woodley fight. I would prefer if it's the Chiesa fight, just because that was crazy. You could make the argument he might have been out, but he managed to survive. With all of that being said, Dorian, before the fight, I thought Chiesa was the dark horse candidate to fight for the title. Now it's Luque who's the dark horse candidate. If Luque wins one more fight, especially if it's against someone like a Leon Edwards, which might be a very good fight to make, because Colby is going to fight Kamaru Usman. Leon Edwards doesn't really have an opponent to my knowledge. I think if you pair those two guys up, the winner of that then fights the next champion. That would be terrific. Chiesa, I think, he's back to the drawing board. But Vicente Luque, if he keeps that up, he might be in line for a title, or he might have to fight Gilbert Burns. And lastly, before I let you wrap this up, I know Gilbert Burns doesn't want to fight Vicente Luque because he corners him. But Gilbert Burns also used to corner Kamaru Usman. So it's hard for me to take his word for it. If there's an opportunity to fight for the belt, I think those two are going to fight.
Yeah, and I mean, Burns has been calling for Leon, and, Leon's been calling it. This welterweight division, man. I thought it was Colby holding in all these fights up. It's not Colby. I thought it was Colby because Colby's at the top and he's ranked number one. Man, Leon is calling for Masvidal to try to get that 3-piece in a soda back in blood, is what he calls it. Jorge is saying, yo, I'll fight any of these dudes. Luque is calling for Usman. Usman, before this fight, was calling for Chiesa. Wonder Boy is calling for Usman. Burns is calling for Leon. Man, this division's all over the place in a good way now, because now we got the title bout, like you said, Usman Colby figured out. Let's get Jorge has to fight either Leon or Luque, in my opinion. I want to see Leon just because of the backstory, obviously, but I think Luque would just be such a great fight because they're just going to stand and bang. And Jorge's a stand and bang guy. Luque's a stand and bang guy. We just saw Jorge get chinned by Usman. Come on, man. This is oh my God. I'm getting hyped. Let's get out of here. I'm getting a little I gotta go watch some Fight Pass after this or something. But moral of the story, Gilbert Burns is not to be trusted when it's talked about not fighting teammates, because he, like you said, he's out for his, and I can't blame him. It's a selfish sport.
Yep.
I might corner you and want to beat you up, but it is what it is, man. As long as we get this division sorted out and the top guys are fighting the top guys. That's all I really care about. 265 was fun. Make sure we check out Bellator. This weekend we'll probably be recapping the title fight. And anything else we need to tell the streets?
Tomorrow night's fight's going to be terrific. You know what? Let me make a quick prediction. John Salter by submission. You heard it here first.
Okay. I'm rolling with Mousasi just because Jacare beat him. I'm not picking against him. He saw Jacare retired. He ain't trying to go out like that. So I got Mousasi. I'll go by decision. I don't think he's going to finish him. But moral of the story, guys, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, subscribe to the YouTube channel, get us to 1,000 by the end of the week. Follow me right here. Download the mobile app even further down. Mike, we out.
We are out.
Get up, let me begin. This is CW.